Hello everyone and welcome to this video. As you can see, or maybe tell, I'm a little bit under the weather myself here, but I do have some awesome content for you today. With this man behind me, I have an interview with David Kim from Korea last week. As you know, I went to Korea thanks to Blizzard for the announcement of WCS. And I had some time one-on-one to sit down with David Kim to talk about the balance of StarCraft 2 and the direction it's going, what he thinks about it, and just what's going on in David Kim's mind. So it's a really good interview. One thing I do have to tell you, though, before you watch it, is I actually didn't really know I was going to be doing any interviews until I was actually there. So I was given a camera, and I was like, here you go, if you want to interview someone, go ahead. So the quality is not the best, but it's still good enough for you to get the answers from David Kim here. So enjoy this video and give me your thoughts afterwards. Leave some comments below this video and I'll check them out. So alright guys, here it goes. Here's David Kim. Hello, we have David Kim here for a bit of an interview. I'm just going to talk a little bit about stuff. He's very excited to talk balance with me. So first of all, how happy are you with the current balance of the game?
So it was a little surprising to us because right when we shipped the game, there was a lot of complaints, but then once like a couple tournaments started happening, like IEM, MLG, the people's reaction totally flipped. So a lot of people were saying, "Oh, this is actually pretty good. Please don't patch, right?" And even today at this event, we got feedback from a lot of the pros, and supposedly among the Korean pros, they're actually saying, "Please don't patch for a long time because the game's actually pretty solid, and they're really working out their build orders, so they don't really want to be bothered with a patch." With an unnecessary patch. So we were kind of surprised to find that, but obviously we don't think it's perfect. We think there are holes, but they're just not found yet. So we'll definitely be watching to make sure that everything's good, and we'll react accordingly.
What did the Korean pros tell you today? Did they say anything when it comes to which race is slightly strong, or they just said just leave it alone, or was there specifics when it comes to your talk?
So I haven't personally talked to them today, but the esports guys that have talked to them in the past, like 1-2 weeks or whatever, he was relaying the fact that like everyone they've talked to so far has been saying that, right? And then the only thing I guess is the medevac speed boost. So one of the best Korean casters, Mr. Che, I was talking to him today, and he was thinking medevacs are a little too much in Terran versus Zerg, not because it's overpowered, but because it makes it so that the game becomes kind of chasing the medevacs around type of game, right? Yeah. So for now, he and I both agreed that it's pretty fun to see that type of constant action throughout the whole game, but it might become a little dull because if that's all you see in every single TVZ, if that's all you see, then it might become a little dull. So we just talked about some ways to kind of change that up without losing the really aggressive constant action gameplay in that matchup. Okay, and moving on to the next, kind of talk about it a little bit with these tournaments and MLG happening, especially because that was the kind of last tournament we've seen. Yeah. You know, a lot of people went into that tournament thinking, you know, Zerg can't compete against Terran, neither can Protoss, and players like Life and MC kind of proved us wrong with MC and Life kind of playing well. Do you foresee this happening again, like at the next tournament? Do you see that something? I think the next tournament's DreamHack from now. Do you see one race going, you know, ahead of the others, or staying at a level? I think that could definitely happen, but I think something like, because even like at MLG, like even all the casters were saying Terran is overpowered, like no one can beat Terran, and even they were wrong, right? So I think that only happened because the game was still so new, so no one really knew what was going on, right? So when casters said that, I don't think they were saying it with 100% confidence, like they would if the game's been around for like a year or two or more, right? So in the next tournament, I can see race dominating also because the pros have been practicing for a while now. But I could also see, I mean, it's hard to say, right? It really depends on how the pros have been practicing, but the feedback that we're getting from the pros is looking pretty good. So I think the next few tournaments will also reflect that, but if not, we'll also deal with it accordingly, right?
So you spoke a little bit about medevacs being kind of the main thing right now. Is there any other worrying trends? I mean, there's a lot of discussions within the community about Void Rays, for example, that their charge being too strong. Is there anything else apart from medevacs? Or?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things on our list that we're watching for that we will not make a move on until we know that it's a problem. So like Void Rays, like you say, Swarm Host seem like they're being a little bit underused compared to what we initially thought. Like Burrow Research Tier 1, we're not seeing as much play as we could. And the few games that we saw where Roach Burrow was utilized in Tier 1, especially against Terran, we thought those games were really exciting. Games didn't end right there because once Terran stabilizes by getting a tank out or two, they can defend, but it's just a matter of how much damage can I do before that timing happens, right? So just stuff like that, right? Just little things here and there, but the big picture because is looking pretty good. So yeah.
I guess you're happy about that then.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It's a lot of hard work gone into it. So
yeah.
So instead of units that are kind of overpowered, let's talk more play styles. Why don't we see much mech, would you say? Because that's actually one of the strategies that wasn't really used that much in Wings of Liberty either, but it was kind of emphasized a lot coming into Heart of the Swarm, because a lot of the I don't even know the name, the BattleNet videos, what are they called? The battle reports were kind of emphasizing a lot of mech, but we don't really see it. Do you know why at all?
Yes, I think there's multiple reasons to it. One is what you just said, right? They're not used to it because they haven't been playing much of it in Wings of Liberty. Other, I think, is even pros. We're seeing that they like to make conclusions, like this is the way to play in this matchup, and not that many people are open to exploring, right? So even last MLG we saw, right before that MLG, we were getting a lot of feedback from players around the world, pro players around the world saying, you can't go Zergling Baneling against Terran because of Widow Mines, but Live totally proved that wrong, right? Or Protoss players, a lot of them were saying, you can't go Oracle because of the Widow Mine threat. And then you see MC going 2 Oracles, one with Envision, one with
Pulsar beam.
Pulsar beam, and then he just dealt with it perfectly fine, right? You can't even drop because of the follow-up Phoenixes and all that, right? So I think it's just a mix of all those things, right? So once it gets figured out by a really talented strategic player, I think we might see more play. But it's also the possibility that it's just too weak right now, right? So for example, in the beta we tried combining the air and ground mech upgrades, and during that time we saw a lot of mech, right? So worst case scenario, that's just an example of if mech is completely not viable right now, that's just a kind of extreme example of a change we can make to make it viable, right? So I think the number's there, but the bigger question I think is bio is just so exciting to watch, I think, compared to mech. Mech is kind of stale. You don't want to move out with too many things. I mean, you don't want to do skirmishes too often. You want to save up your ball and fight, whereas bio is the complete opposite. So do we even want mech to be as viable as bio? And if not, then what ratio is correct? So those are the questions I think we have to answer before,
Do you think the use and the new Medivac pushes more bio than mech? Because I guess you could argue the point that, Medivacs could be used with Hellions in the same way for harassment, but do you think that Medivacs could be one of the big reasons as well?
Oh yeah, for sure.
But they're just
not just the drops, but also the healing, right?
Yeah.
It heals every single bio unit, whereas on the mech side, it only heals Hellbats, and that's it, right? So, yeah.
Okay, so, I mean, since we're talking about Terran, might as well stay with Terran. Do you reckon, or, I mean, what's your thought on Korean Terrans? Throughout all of StarCraft 2, and Wings of Liberty, granted there's been a couple of Terrans here and there, but not to the same success as Korean ones. There has been good Protoss players and good Zerg players that have come from Europe and North American scene, but a lack of Terrans. Any insight on why that could be? The Terran players in Korea, why are they better?
I think it's hard to say, but I think one of the reasons is Korean players, I think, share information more, right? So within their teams, if a strategy is good, or if you're supposed to micro a certain army a certain way, that spreads a lot faster than in Europe or in the US. So I think that's part of it, and the other part of it I think is Terran plays. Each race plays very differently, right? And I think the strength of Terran is the really precise micro that you can use with your army, and that I think is where Koreans excel the most. Not because they're just better at games in general, but because they're so organized and their practice structure is so strict, and they just put a lot of hours into it, right? Whereas like strategy, I think, is more difficult to just practice that way because it's just the way you think. Whereas mechanics, Korean players really have it down because their practice format is so good, right? So I'm kind of hoping, especially with with today's announcement, I'm kind of hoping more teams kind of maybe Korean teams don't move to the US or something, but maybe more players join non-Korean teams, and that practice format is more defined elsewhere outside of Korea, right? And if that happens, I think as a fan, the game will be just like a lot more exciting to watch. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Are there any HOTS units that you're super happy about? Are there any HOTS units you're not so happy about when it comes to performance in games, or whether the concept of what you originally designed it for isn't maybe not working out?
So I think the only thing is the swarm host, like I said before. It's not seeing as much play as we expected, because when used right, the unit is really strong, but it's very difficult to use it right, because the way we see it is you're supposed to use swarm hosts so that the enemy's army never approaches, say, like one screen less than where the swarm host is, right? So you're constantly on the move, constantly firing locusts from like 2 screens away, and that's so hard to deal with. But because of the burrow time, because of the movement speed of the swarm host, stuff like that, it's kind of hard to use it that way. But if this trend continues, then we'll definitely look at maybe tuning the numbers to make that more possible, because we think the swarm host is a very different siege mechanic compared to any other siege unit in the game in Wings of Liberty. And not only that, it's very Zerg. It has that very Zerg feel because it just constantly gives you these sort of weak free units over and over non-stop, right? And then the biggest success you can get with that unit is by using as many locusts as possible. So I think the concept of the unit is very unique and different and cool. So yeah, it'll be cool to see more usage out of the swarm host, whether it be us going in to and tuning the unit, or if players just find out better ways to use it. Yeah.
Are you happy with the Tempest?
Tempest is what it is, right? Like, it's a poking tool and it's an anti-massive weapon. And for that, I think it works. But of course, you can't compare that tool with something like the Oracle or the Widowmine. So I think for what it is, it's pretty solid. And that's why we added 3 new units for the Protoss, because the Tempest is a fairly niche unit in its role, and the Mothership Core is a limit one, whereas the other races got 2 units.
Okay, so final question here, a little bit away from game balance. It's more maps. So let's talk some maps. Obviously, you know the Brood War scene, you know how it worked. Casper were pretty much in control of maps. They made maps pretty much every season. They had people employed to make maps, and they were good maps. They were pro gamers. Ex-pro gamers would play them to make sure they were good. That's something that seems to be lacking a little bit in StarCraft 2, whether it be talented map makers out there not getting the opportunity to show their maps or time. Has Blizzard yourself thought about changing it? If we look at the current ladder pool, Daybreak's there, which was a map that was used for a very long time, but towards the end of Wings of Liberty was not so loved anymore. And to this day, the same. There's I think it's Newkirk City becomes a lot of 50-50 map splits as well. How does that come into your mind when you look at maps, especially for the WCS this year is going to be very focused on certain map pools. So
on the map side, we're kind of thinking to coordinate more so with tournaments. So right now we actually have 3 maps lined up for Season 2, 3 1v1 maps lined up for Season 2 that we passed around to every single tournament organizer. So GSL, GameNet, MLG, ESL, DreamHack, all those tournaments, and then we're getting feedback from those organizers because they know how tournament games. They're really on top of how tournament games play, and they know exactly what components make a map tournament viable. So we're having those tournaments review those maps, and going forward, we're planning on doing that every time we make a new map by Blizzard. And on top of that, so in Season 2, we have those 3 maps lined up. Season 3, our plan is to use, say, like GSL maps or Pro League maps, because, like you said, they have professional map makers that they hire for their tournament to make their maps, right? So I think just a mix of us reaching out to tournaments to get help when creating our maps, as well as just straight up using tournament maps is the current goal for 1v1 Heart of the Storm ladder maps.
Cool. All right. So that's this interview done with David Kim. Thanks, for joining me here and giving us some awesome answers. And I hope you guys enjoyed the video as well. So thank you. Any last words? Anything you want to say? Or?
So I think, as always, I think it's pretty important for everyone to realize is we're always watching the tournaments. And when a concern arises, we don't want to be too quick to judge because, like, for example, right? Everyone was saying Widow Mines are a little too strong all throughout the last MLG. But if we acted on that, then who knows what would have happened, because now people are learning to deal with Widow Mines. So just please be more understanding that we take our time to make sure that something is a real problem before we address it. So yeah, and just have fun watching and play StarCraft 2.
All right, listen to that man there. He's telling you the truth. All right, guys, thank you very much. I'll see you in a bit.